Cool. So we're going to create a game project. Just to show you some of the different versions, I'm going to do this as a third-person project. Okay, and that's just so that you can see what a third-person project looks like. It's not all that different. It's the same game engine and same assets, pretty much. I'm going to leave. I just want to make sure I've got starter content. And I'm just going to call this blueprint testing. I'm going to hit create project. Cool. Cool. So I'm just going to press play here, folks, so you can see what the third person example looks like. You're just able to run around. Can you crouch? Don't think you can crouch. You can press space to jump. You can see my machine is not great, but it gets the idea across. Especially when I'm running OBS and streaming to the screen. But that's basically it. Okay, it's kind of a decent third-person starting point, basically. Okay. What we're going to do is we're going to create some custom jump pads within this game, so we're going to use a few blueprints to do that. You don't necessarily need to follow along now. I can build this now, and then I'll have the video up on YouTube for the second part of the class, the lab, where you can work on this and kind of expanding on it. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is, where do you think, if I'm making something that I'm going to be testing again and again, where should I place it in the level? Right where you spawn. Okay, this is a minor pet peeve of mine. Sometimes students place stuff like way off away from where you're starting the game. It's much more straightforward and easier to place things in front of the player if you're just testing out a mechanic or something like that. Okay, or an interaction, because it means you can test it out straight away when you're in the game. You're not running around trying to find it. So I'm going to drag this empty actor into the world here, and I'm just going to place it right in front of the player. And I can click here and I can rename this. And I'm going to call this jump pad. Okay. And the reason I'm renaming it is so that I'm like able to basically find it in the level and I can kind of see where it is. So next thing I'm going to do is add a, so if I press the play the game now, okay, there's nothing in front of me. That's because this empty actor is basically the same as, you know, in Unity we've got empty game objects. Yeah, that's all this is. It's just a holder for things. So I'm going to add a box to this. So I can hit add component here. And down here on the left hand side under common, there's one called cube. And there it is. Okay, and that's going to create it. And what I'm going to do is drag this cube. Sorry, I need to expand this down a little. Going to drag this cube up here to default scene root, and that's just going to be now, like that's going to be the start of my game object. And I can change the scale on this. Oh, that's the wrong one. Sorry, it's the Z scale I need to change. So something fairly small like that, that just pokes out of the ground. The value on that there is 0.16, 0.15, 0.2, anything like that. It doesn't, again, it doesn't matter. We don't have to be too precise. We're just kind of marking something up for gameplay purposes. The next thing I'm going to do is add another component. What do you think I'm going to add next? Right? Yeah, cool. And a collider is called a collision. I know the terminology here is slightly different, but if you go add component, you can search for and what you want is so basically click box collision, and you should see this orange box is going to appear around there, and that basically represents our box collision. We can move that separately because it's a child game object, so we can move that up a little bit, we can scale it, all that sort of stuff. Okay. We might want to maybe make it a little bit bigger on the these dimensions so that it just fills the box a little bit more, something like that. Okay. And that's basically it. I don't think there's too much more we need to do there. This is our like empty game object setup. So the next thing we're going to do is convert this to a blueprint. And luckily, it's right beside the button we've been using all along. So instead of add component, we're going to hit blueprint/add script. Hold on, if I pull this wider. Blueprint/add script. I click that. It's called a jumppad_blueprint, which is perfect because I named my actor properly. It's actually put a convenient name on it. Yeah. So saving this as a blueprint, yeah, it's going to turn it into a prefab with the scripts attached, basically. You can create, in a few weeks' time, we'll be looking at, you can create, I think it's called blueprint instances, which are like sub-blueprints of something. So if you wanted a jump pad that maybe change the player's color or something like that, you could have a different type of prefab. Basically, it's a child prefab that takes on some of the behaviors. We don't need to change anything here, but one thing I'm going to do is just change the path on this so that it's beside the player. So it's third person BP and inside this blueprints folder. Hit OK, hit select, and this should, this creates our jump pad blueprint. I'm going to dock that tab up there. So this is, like I said, we can work on this in isolation, like working on prefab inside. One thing I'm going to do, well, guess I'm going to take this box and drag it up. Why do I do that? Yeah, like there's a slim chance, let's say if I place this somewhere and this part of it's exposed underneath the ceiling or something like that, and someone jumps that, I think there's going to have velocity or something like that. So I just want to be kind of careful with this. Again, it's probably a rare occurrence, but there's no harm in doing it. Okay, so I'm going to move that up there. The other thing, actually, I'm just going to jump in here, and you'll see this blueprint is here, this jump pad blueprint. Okay, so it's in our content browser. We can open it up that way if we need to open it or edit it again. Now, in this viewport, I'm going to have this selected. This it's called box. You can see the variable name is called box. Over here, I'm going to click on event graph. Okay, and this basically represents like where we're going to do our visual coding and our visual script. Okay, so we're going to be able to like create nodes and have things like that. You'll see here it's showing us that we have the box still selected. And the reason for that is we're going to create an event. And so you can right click and move this around. So right click will let you pan it and you can zoom in and out with middle mouse wheel. If you, here it says right click to create new nodes. And here it says add event for box. What do you think type of event might we want to add here? Collision. And anyone want to guess what we'd be using here? Yeah, begin overlap. That's like on trigger enter basically. Begin overlap is when does this thing collide with that. So add on component begin overlap. And we get this, which looks very like a little bit daunting, doesn't it? Like there's a lot going on there. Is that fair to say? So like you maybe look at that going like there's a lot going on. Some of these things we need and some of them we don't. What's useful is let's say out of this we can pull out the other actor. So that's the first thing we're going to do. Or well, sorry, we're not actually going to. I'll show you how that would work. We're not going to have to do it necessarily. But you can click here, promote the variable. Okay, and it creates a variable here for other actor. So that means we can then use that variable for the other actor if we want to do other things. Okay, I'm just going to delete that for now. But we'll see how we can kind of create things. So the next thing we're going to do is drag out this here, this little right. Let's see if we can. This little right arrow thing here. That is the execution node. Okay, that says like this is a chunk of code. This is basically like a function, and this function is on component begin overlap. It's just going to find out like what the other actor is, the other component, blah blah blah, all all these things. Other body elements. If we want this to do something, then we're going to pull a pin out of here, because once this is executed, we can then make it execute the next command. Does that make sense? We're able to chain events together, basically. Okay, cool. So this here, this little pin, as it's called, that is the execution of commands. So that means that once this happens, once this begin overlap happens, it's now going to execute something else if we want it to. And what we're going to do is we're going to drag this, okay, and we're going to search for, we're going to type in equal. Sometimes we have to turn off context sensitive. So we want to go for equal and object. Okay, so this shows up as a utility here, equal object. If you're not seeing that, if you're not seeing things there, make sure you uncheck context sensitive. Okay, because sometimes it's just going to do things that are context sensitive, basically. Cool. So we now get this. And what we're going to do is we're going to compare the other actor. This is the object that collided with the player, or with this blueprint. So we're wondering what the other is. What do you think we want to check here? Yeah, we're going to check and see if it's the player. So that's in Unity we might have in code said if other dot tag equals player. This we're able to create this slightly differently. To get the player, we right click and type get, and it's going to come up because it's one of the favorited things. But get player pawn. And your player pawn is basically the player within the game. This is like the default player. Okay, and this is going to return a value at index 0. Which pawn is the player? Yeah. Because at the moment we only have one pawn in the game, so you can see here it says like index 0. We might have to, if we had multiple, we might change that index to be a range or to like loop through a range of those numbers. This player pawn is this is a utility function that searches all the pawns in our game. Basically, characters and things like that are called pawns. So it's going to search through everything that's a pawn. Like, so for each game object of type pawn, it's going to search, find them, and then it's going to say whether it's equal to this. Does that make sense? Yeah, it's going to search through and try to find the pawn. So what we're going to do is this is going to check. This is going to see if this is equal to this. To do an if statement in this, it's called branch. Okay, and you see it's under flow control branch. So how do you think I'd wire up this if statement? Anyone want to guess? Cool. So it's fairly, once you get used to this, it's not too bad. We just drag this white arrow, which is an output of this, into this. And what that means is, once it does this component begin overlap, then do this branch. What do you think we put into the condition? Yeah, this equals. So this is doing a check to see if the other actor is equal to the player. If it is, that condition will be, well, then we can do something if it's true or false. Does that make sense? Basically, our if statements were like making our own branches. This is the way it functions, basically. Yeah. Now, one thing we can do is we can take this return variable here. I'm just going to turn this to context sensitive. And there's this. What we're going to do is search for cast to character, and it's going to show up there. That's it. Thinking that's probably what we want to do. Now, this is where, right, with blueprints, it kind of gets complex because you almost have to know the kind of things you're trying to do. Like sometimes you'll just, honestly, I don't do blueprints the whole time, but you'll be pulling pins out and you'll be like, okay, is this what I want? But basically, because we're going to launch our character, we know that, okay, we're going to use this to launch the character. Character is a broader class than pawn. Pawn is like a movable character, basically, something that the player has control over. It's one of the player's pawns. And a character is anything that's going to be moving around the So we're going to cast a character. And we can move this here. And that's going to convert this into a character. And we are going to type in hold on. So I'm going to drag this pen out of here, sorry, and type in launch, and it's going to give me launch character as an option there. Do you think anything's going to happen if I step on that? No. Why do you think not? Yeah, at the minute there's no connection from this branch to that. There's no, because this isn't one, basically that will never execute. So basically I have no input to this one here, cast character. So I can move this, let's say here, move this over a little like this. And now I can say if this is true, so if it is the player that overlaps, I'm going to launch the player. Where do you think I should give velocity there? Y, yeah? Is it Z? Yeah. It's Y in Unity. So yeah, Z. Okay. It's the weird, like this is the thing. But look, this is one of those things, if you mess it up, you can fix it pretty easily. So I'm just going to type in 500 manually here. Then I want to hit save and compile. Oh, sorry. This target as character. Yeah, I just need to make sure I'm sending the character forward to this. Okay. Yeah, cool. I'm going to hit compile, and that should hopefully no errors there. Hit save. I'm going to press play now. Cool. Can you see that? Cool. So you can see there, it's just basically giving that vertical force. Any questions on that? Yeah.
Do you show how you put the little box collider in?
Yeah, so I'll do that on adding the box collider is very straightforward. So we start off with our empty game object. We added a box. Sorry, we added a if I type in cube, wasn't it? It's called. First thing we did was added a cube. We promoted that to be the scene root, so like the cube is basically the parent. And then we added a component for the box collision. And this now is our box collision, and we can move it around separate to the cube itself. Does that make sense? So it's just a component that we add to it. Okay. Cool. So what I'm going to say, we should probably take a break there, and we'll come back for the lab where I'm going to ask you to implement that, and then I'm going to show you one last thing where we can promote these to variables. It's pretty easy to do, and then we can edit it inside in the editor as opposed to needing to edit the blueprint. Okay, cool. So we'll take a 15-minute break. We'll be back at, let's say, 5 past. Be liberal what 15 minutes means.